So, as the rabbi mentioned, the Vilna Gaon. Gaon can be interpreted a few different ways. My understanding, and I'm trying real hard not to bore you with this. I know it's late on the Shabbos. Everybody's, probably ready for a nap, but I will. I'll try to. Try to not be super boring on this. But the word, if I'm not mistaken, comes from Ga'ar, which means to be great or like um, in a sense like the amazing, the renowned. In some senses, it can be even used like like a little bit arrogantly, but the greatest, the great, the wise, so on and so forth. I don't exactly know that word myself, so I'm sure whatever word you said, Rabbi, would be close to it. But particularly, he was known for
Genius.
Vilna. Great. What did you say, Rabbi? Genius?
Well, it's go ahead.
Yeah, genius. But I would say like today, like you were saying, maybe in your translation, it would be like the goat, like what we use, like the goat all the time, like the greatest of all time type of thing. So
Yeah, that like the Chuck Norris of there we go.
there you go.
So I hope everybody can see the presentation I have here. The Gra, the Vilna Gaon. Vilna is where he was. His name is Eliyahu ben Shlomo Zalman, and um, or Elijah ben Solomon. And I write here that he's a non-traditional Jewish scholar who influenced Jewish thought. Why do I say he's non-traditional? He wasn't a rabbi. I mean, they put the title of rabbi on him at times, but he never accepted smicha, and he never became a rabbi. He was to the concept of being a mensch and understanding specifically Torah. He was unbelievable. And we're going to go through some of his facts, so I'll try not to bore you with too much. Um, I'll move on to my next picture. He was the Superman, like the rabbi was saying, genius. He was the Superman. And you see he's depicted here wearing tefillin. Um, he believed that you should wear tefillin all the time. And so he did wear it all the time. Now, Ashkenazi Jews, we don't really like to wear tefillin all the time because there's certain things that you're not supposed to do wearing tefillin, you know, like go to the bathroom, for lack of a better term, or thinking about secular things, that kind of idea. So, but he wore it all the time. Um, he was born in Sialek, a Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, to Solomon Zalman, and it was a very well-known rabbinical family in 1720. So really, it's not all that long ago. Our nation began in 1776. The Marine Corps began in 1775. Hoorah. Anyways, not important on that part. But anyways, so um, this was really in the broad scheme of history, relatively recent. There is legendary stories about him. He's kind of like the um is a legendary character like Daniel Boone or something like that. Some of which I'm sure is true, some of which might be exaggerated, but um there was a time that he stayed at he believed in when you went to Sukkot that you should stay in the sukkah, and he went to jail for a very interesting thing we'll get into a little bit later. But and he stayed awake for 8 days. As a matter of fact, he said that he only slept for 4 hours a night in 2.5 hour increments. I don't know again whether or not that's true, but he was very observant of how much time he wasted not spending time studying or reading Torah, that kind of thing. He used to have a ledger in which he wrote down all the times that he wasted not studying Torah, and he would mourn over it. The interesting thing about him is that he is said to have memorized the entire Tanakh by age 4. That's impressive. That's very impressive. By age 7, he was teaching Talmud to the future author of the Jerusalem Talmud. One of them, anyways. By age 11, it was said that he memorized the whole Talmud. That's a lot. It's a huge document. I think it's over 2,000 pages and many different volumes that we're talking there. So, and also, as we will mention later, he is going to be at the forefront of the Litvaker, or the Lithuanian Jewish and Hasidic feud. Here's a picture, probably not exactly of his time, probably that's more in the 1800s, but of what the town of Vilna may have looked like back at his time. Vilna was an area that before his birth and during his childhood was at war. So it was not doing very well, relatively speaking, and was not exceptionally well known. However, there were some Jewish sages there. Obviously, his family was from a very strong rabbinical line. I think from what I understand, there was little more than 1,000 Jews there. There wasn't a whole lot. However, Vilna would become, because of him and his genius in studying Torah, it would become one of the centers of the Jewish world. As a matter of fact, it was eventually called the Jerusalem of Lithuania, which, I mean, you would think they'd call Crown Heights, New York that, but so for that to be called the Jerusalem of Lithuania, that was a very strong emphasis on what an amazing thing that the Vilna became, just because of his the attention to him as a great Torah scholar. And he was an exceptional Torah scholar, and he was a kind of a commenter and editor of the Mishnah and various other writings from Jewish sages, which he would very easily correct and change the writings of the sages, even some of the stuff that the sages wrote in the medieval period. He wouldn't have any problems correcting what they wrote. This was truly an expert, and he definitely thought that he understood and with great confidence understood, the Torah, the Tanakh, and the Chumash. Vilna had a 30% Jewish population at the time of World War II, so I guess around the 1940s. To survive through the Holocaust, and then it got wiped out by the Soviet pogroms. So very uninteresting place, except for him. I mean, really, he brought a lot of attention to it, and ended up bringing, I think, 20 or 30,000 Jews to Vilna. There's another little collection here. There's the Superman rabbi in the comparison with the Vilna Gaon. I don't know if that's a real picture of him at the left. I think it may be. I don't know, but just as conceptualized that in the sense of what it means to be Jewish and understanding Torah and living Torah, this guy was like that. And in some ways, he was like a modern Yeshua in a lot of ways, especially in his radical criticism of the education system. He quickly got out of school. He didn't have any regular education, and he made some pretty disparaging comments about the yeshivas in Vilna, and that essentially that they were worthless. And throughout his entire time, he never went to school, although he did have study partners, one of which was the Dobre of Negim, I think. I didn't write that one down. I should have, but that's an interesting story. We'll get into that in a second. So he was a David Crockett of Judaism. Like I said, he spent 8 days in jail. According to a legend, he didn't sleep because he refused to sleep because he felt like you could only sleep during Sukkot in a sukkah. Memorized the Talmud, the entire Talmud by age 11. Memorized the Tanakh by age 4. Is the youngest person who could recite the whole Bible in history that we know of was age 5. Okay. However, when you consider that being the Bible in Christianity, that's 66 books. It's not anywhere near as large as understanding the Talmud. It's over 2,700 pages. It's almost an impossible feat, even though some yeshivot managed to get their yeshiva buchers to memorize the Tanakh and the Mishnah by age 13, which that's amazingly impressive when you think about how much knowledge that must be. He devoted his entire life to studying Torah, correcting Mishnaic and Talmudic work. He was an intellectual hero of Judaism, and he had no formal training and did not go to yeshiva. It was highly critical of schools. This is a picture of what Vilna looks like today, and it has like a different name. I think it's Villainous. So this is where we get into why he got locked up, you know. And in order to explain this, I'm going to put in a little joke here. And you probably heard this already. If you know me, you've heard this already. Just pretend like you don't. I'm very good at being receptive to fake laughter. Anyways, so there was I think Safa actually was working through this joke during Sukkot, but I'll tell it to you the way I know it. So there was somebody who was going to his rabbi, and he was called the rabbi late at night. He said, "Rabbi, I'm very sorry to tell you this. I don't know what to do. I need your help. My son has become a Christian." And the rabbi says, "You're never going to believe this, but my son has become a Christian too." So the guy says, "Rabbi, what do we do? What do we do? Our sons become Christians. What's the answer here?" And so he says, "We'll do what every righteous Jew would do. We'll daven, we'll go to Hashem, we'll call him up. He will give us the right answer." So they go to Hashem and they start davening. They say, "Hashem, what do we do? Our son has become a Christian." And Hashem says, "You're never going to believe this, but," okay. Now, there was an interesting story. I'm sorry, it was horrible. There was an interesting story, actually, because the leader of the Kehillah, this large group of Jewish authority in Vilna, his son actually went and became Catholic. I said they're Orthodox Christianity. I found out later it was wrong, but he ended up going and converting to Catholicism, maybe because of, just being rebellious. Who knows? So what ended up happening is the leader of the Kehillah came to the Vilna Gaon, and he says to him, he's like, "Can you help me?" And so they came up with a plan to rescue this Jewish boy from Catholicism. Now, this was kind of a big deal because the Catholics have been doing a lot of mean stuff to Jews. It's one of the things that we all realize, coming from Messianic and Christian backgrounds, is that we kind of were the bad guys. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean our intent was wrong, but if you consider the Holocaust, intent doesn't really matter. It's what we did. And as Christianity, we didn't do a lot of good. I mean, we did some good, but we did a lot of bad, right? Especially to the Jews. And this was one of those situations where Catholics had actually been stealing children and then converting them. And that's where we get the Anusim and all that stuff. And so this was a reverse of that situation. They were going to go steal themselves a Catholic convert who, was Jewish and bring him back. So they did. They came up with this plan. They went, they convinced another Jew who converted to Catholicism to go on a nature walk with him or whatever. and then they jumped him ghetto style, threw him in the back of a van, and wasn't the van, but you know what I mean. They got him, and then they convinced him, that to return back to Judaism. They were successful, right? Well, the Catholics found out about this, and needless to say, it was a big deal for them, and they threw the Vilna Gaon into jail, and that was probably reasonable because he was such an expert in Torah that very little happened without him knowing or approving in Jewish culture in Vilna. And they said that when they tried to question him, he treated them like they were from another nation, like he was a king from another nation, and he refused to acknowledge him. And he continued to have this thing where he, would not sleep during Sukkot, because when they captured him, it happened to be during Sukkot. So that's where it was, where his arrest and his criminal life came from. A little bit of a gangster, not really, but and this is interesting because if you think about it, something similar happens in the Fiddler on the Roof. We have Tevye and we have Chavela. Kabbalah is the daughter, if I'm not mistaken, that goes and joins the Orthodox Church or whatever to be with the very last one. And then he's crying out, Tevye is crying out. He's like, Kabbalah, of all the things I could forgive, this is one that I can't. So, like I said, there was the Gaon style, which is the reason why I'm wearing this today. It's actually what I wear when I go to do the ministry with the inmates, and I'm, the Orthodox inmates. But that's because it's the only nice thing I have. Everything else looks like roguish and, otherwise work. But I also thought it was fitting, so I figured I'd go ahead and wear this. Don't worry, I'm wearing shorts underneath. It's not like I went the whole way. You know what I'm saying? I'm joking. Uh, Says allegedly he wore tefillin it all the time. And according to some sources, ancient sources, wearing tefillin was actually wearing tefillin all the time is actually how they did it. I don't know, but it's fascinating. Um, he had very strict views on family. He actually married 3 times. I was wrong there, but it's interesting because he only thought of his family when he was in a bathhouse. Um, and his mentality was so long as he was in a place where he could think of holy things, he thought only of holy things. So he only thought of his family when he was in a non-holy place. And he would often leave for long periods of time, and he had not very good communication with his wife or his children. One time, one of his children was sick, and he had been gone for a long time, and he came back for the sick kid because he had gone into a bathhouse and he remembered, oh, wasn't there one of my kids that was sick? So he was very detached from his family, the rest of the world. This guy was cloistered inside the Vilna. He did become very famous in his lifetime, but for the most part, he was just completely obscure. And he went on these spiritual journeys where he would often disguise who he was. I suppose as a way of not letting the fame of this get to him. He was offered smicha several times. He refused to become a rabbi. And his viewpoints of yeshiva, as I said, were not very good. He did have some people that he traveled with, like I said, and there's a concept of the word del Vilnor Gaon, right? So it's Vilna Gaon, but Vilnor is, I guess, is the way Henry Abraham said, who is one of my main sources for studying this. The Vilnor is saying anybody can be, right? So it's a concept, even if you fail to achieve the rank of rabbi, even if you can't become a rabbi, you can still become the Vilna Gaon. You can still, and of course, it would be very, very hard because this guy knew a whole lot. And I don't know if there was another Gaon called in that specific way like him. Of course, what an amazing thing it would possibly be to have that much love and desire and study for Torah that it just became your every single moment. Obviously, every Jew should aspire to that, but um, the concept is, despite the title, walking in the path of the Gra is attainable, even if in reality he was as kind of a superhuman, and that would be unlikely. He again, I went over. He said he counted how much time he'd wasted that he had, and he wept over it. And he employed professional critics of himself. So there was a popular thing among Judaism at the time that they would hire these Mashiachs, right? And the Mashiachs were kind of like hecklers to an extent. They were critics. They would they would tell you what you did wrong. Now, Judaism doesn't use these anymore because now they've allowed marriage and we have wives, but thank you. Somebody laughed there. Anyways, but back in that time, you had to pay somebody to actually, do it. And one of these that he paid was the Dobro Higim, I think. I've got to remember that word. But this guy was actually a very prolific preacher, not in the Christian sense, but a teacher of Judaism, who was very well followed and was extremely wise. And he hired him because it was just about to come before Yom Kippur, and he wanted to find out what it is possibly he could be doing wrong. So this guy says, "Okay, kick out all your Shiva students. I'll tell you, and or your Talmudim, because he didn't have any Shiva students, not in his lifetime, anyways." And so he says, he talks with them, and when the students come back, the Vilna Gaon is crying, and there's his face full of tears, and they came out and they asked him, "Was like, what could you have possibly said that could make the Vilna Gaon cry?" He said, "It's easy enough for you to sit in here aside from the world and study Torah and not have to experience life like the rest of us. It's easy to be a Vilna Gaon in that sense." So while he was a recluse from the world, he was not immune to the reality of the criticism that he also was not in the regular life, you know, experiencing as that. Anyways, um, here's another couple of pictures. I think he kind of looks like me, actually. I'm just kidding. Joke. So the last thing to mention is the harem on Hasidim, right? So a harem is the highest level of ban, I guess you could say. It's worse than a gezerah. It's basically saying, it's the highest form of ban or censor of any Jewish practice, right? Now, it's important to understand that it was like in the 1600s that you had the Shabbatones, Shabbat V or something. I don't know that guy's name very well. I've got it written here. Shabbat V. Yeah, okay. So, and there was a false Messiah, and he admittedly was a false Messiah. There was a lot of followers of him. There's a lot of problems that it caused within Judaism. Um, and there was still some left. And early Hasidic Judaism had some weird ideas. Okay, um, and he was very much a critic of Hasidic Judaism. And it's not like we had the internet and Wikipedia. He didn't know everything, and he refused to talk to the Hasidic rebbes and leaders, and so he could end this beef or at least hear their side. So he put some accusations against him, and it's important to understand that not all these accusations are um, wrong. And it's hard to find his words because not a lot of what he said has been translated into English. He wrote in rabbinical Hebrew and he spoke Yiddish, and there's you can find it on Sefaria, his writings, but it's really hard to find out what he's saying unless you speak Hebrew, which may it be one day that we all do so fluently, hopefully with Mayim's great classes, we can do so, but it's a long ways for me, I can tell you that. But um there was the Shabbatai Zvi caused a great threat to Judaism. There's a lot of well-meaning Jews that followed them, and Hasidic Judaism also had some people who said some very bad things about them, like that in his understanding, they were all followers of Shabbatai Zvi. And obviously, it comes down to later that's not true, but that's what he thought they did, and he didn't like their antinomian approach. Kind of in their view, in his viewpoint, they didn't follow the rules and norms and customs lazily, like meaning they just didn't care to. And there were some that were like that. There were some very weird things, like according to Henry Abramson, again, who I stole most of this from, um, he he the Hasids, some of the Hasids, it was said of them that when they were supposed to be davening, to imagine God as a undressed woman. It's probably not how their bubby taught them how to daven. So it was very awkward in some of these early practices. And when there was Lashon Hara going against the Hasidim like this, and they didn't know any better, they're going to say the reaction that the Vilna Gaon gave was very understandable. It was not, I feel, correct. And even though he was a master of the Torah, who can I say it against him? Well, I think the future, where we are right now, shows Hasidim. However, there was a very interesting thing because he raised an accusation against how strictly they observed Torah. It actually was one of the reasons why they observed Torah so strict to this day. And it helped Hasidim, which today Hasidim has grown extremely large. As a matter of fact, there are some Jews that believe that, if you say something about Hasidics at all, that something bad will happen to you, like a superstition. So this is where he did issue a cherem. It was part of a cherem against Hasidic Judaism. Actually, it would even turn out to become worse than that. Shortly after his death, they would petition the Tsar to try to shut down Hasidic Judaism with all kinds of um, accusations. Meanwhile, the Tsar responded to it like, I don't even know what that is. Figure it out for yourself. And he did send somebody down there to go and, try to sort out this mess. And it's really unfortunate because the Litvaker community in Judaism especially is some of the best Torah scholars we've ever had, and some of the most pragmatic. What the Vilna Gaon spent most of his time doing was correcting texts instead of necessarily writing a whole bunch on his own. Although he did write some books, he was correcting things. He was making Judaism better. And even though there may have been some cost to his family, he gave his entire life to studying Torah. And that's really an amazing thing. And even though, again, he raised an accusation against Hasidim, and it was very much a personal accusation, from what I understand, at least from my source there, it was very much a personal accusation against Hasidim. He did it wrongly. But he did it with the desire to purify Judaism. So, that's pretty much that. Move on to the next one. These are the Hasids there. Oh, it's got a nice tribal. And finishing up with my thoughts. Look, if you're asleep right now, I don't blame you. Okay. Anyways, so I'll end with this. Wouldn't it be nice to be a Gaon, to have his knowledge, his understanding, and his wisdom? But even a Gaon can be wrong. No matter how amazing we can be, we are not God. We are humans, and humans cannot ever reach the status of God. No human should have divine authority, and we should be careful never to put a human on the same pedestal we put Hashem. What identifies us as Jews is that we put the God of our fathers before all human authority. Indeed, we hear his word through the prophets, and indeed his wisdom and the sages, and indeed his salvation through Mashiach. But he and he alone sits on the throne of our hearts, and his Torah abides forever. I think the Gaon was wrong about Hasidic Judaism, but may we as followers of Mashiach ben Yosef learn from this and give no accusation for our brethren to say we're not followers of the law of God. Bless Hashem, the Blessed One. There you go. That's it. Kaput.
We only had one person sleeping over here. But I was not sleeping. I had my eyes closed, but I was fully listening the whole entire time. But hold on. I wanted to say that Hasidic Judaism was not that old and developed back in his day, and so there was a big division between the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim. Mitnagdim means I think that means like the opposers. They were the people who were opposing this kind of new movement that was coming up. And Hasidic Judaism was kind of like more emotional. It emphasized more, just emotion and joy, which it still does today. But I think, if the Vilna Gaon was alive today, yes, like Pentecostals, yes, yeah, exactly. But just like Atzoyahu was saying, it's evolved today, and even though maybe some of the earlier Hasidim may have been like that, they're certainly not antinomian or have no respect for the law. And I think that if the Vilna Gaon could see what it evolved to today, I don't think he would be so opposed to Hasidic Judaism anymore. But there are some sects in Hasidic Judaism where they do put their Rebbe to such a high pedestal that it becomes unhealthy, or just kind of crazy. And I don't know if the Rebbe's mean to do that themselves, or it's just kind of a human phenomenon sometimes to do that, to elevate someone that you respect so much to a status that they shouldn't have. I know that a lot of people did that with Schneerson. I remember when I heard one testimony about how someone said that in their community, it was a Chabad community, she said that it was where Schneerson lives. It was a community where Schneerson lived. She's saying that when he was alive, when the Rebbe was alive, everyone would talk about Torah all the time. And then after he passed away, everyone would talk about the Rebbe all the time. And there's also, the movement within Chabad, which is kind of underground now. There's not a lot of people who admit this, but there was a movement called the Elokists. I'm not sure if they took on the name themselves, or if it was given to them by opponents, but they were criticized because some of them believed that Schneerson was like God, and that he was like a divine Messiah, which made it very similar to Christianity. And so there were a lot of people in Judaism who, when Chabad first started getting popular, they were very much opposed to Chabad because of some of these strange things, but didn't necessarily mean that it everyone thought this, but the few sometimes give a bad name for the rest. So also I'm thinking, all the things that they were saying about how he learned this at age 4 and he knew the whole Talmud at age 7, stuff that I'm thinking he had a photographic memory. So whatever he looked at, he just remembered it. He's just a prodigy. I don't think it's impossible, those things that were said, because there's people with those kinds of memories even now, and they're rare and thought of as geniuses even now.
Well, it sounds like even also his followers might have kind of done the same thing as, like Chabad, like followers of Schneerson or whatever. Like he may have been opposed to certain things, but I think his followers sounds like they took it to further extremes or whatever, from the report that Atzoyahu gave. But yeah, definitely he's probably had some type of photographic memory type of thing. He's able to memorize the whole Talmud, that kind of thing.
Also, my friend was telling me that the Vilna Gaon, one of his major contributions he wrote Kol HaTor, which means voice of the turtle dove. That's a translation. And that work was important because when Israel first reformed as a nation, most Jews opposed it, especially Orthodox Jews. They opposed the political rebirth of Israel, but his book, The Voice of the Turtle Dove, helped to kind of change the hearts of a lot of Jews to see it as something coming from God instead of something to be opposed to.
I have a question. That's a lot. Are you still on?
I'm here, and thank you for that, Robertson.
Who were his Talmudim? I know he had a he didn't like the yeshiva system, but what obviously we have he had some disciples. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the stories of the exploits he did, and who was there a movement that was formed around him, or was he embraced within a certain movement, or what was after he died? Was there what happened? How did it go forward? How did we get these stories?
Well, there is actually to this day, the followers of Vilna Gaon still wear tefillin all the time. They see them in the market,
Wow, interesting.
buying stuff and wearing tefillin. I don't know who specifically his followers were, but the guy was an absolute genius and everybody knew it. And he was very correct. In a sense, the Gaon lives in all of us who will take what his mentality was and bring it. And he desperately wanted Mashiach to come. He wasn't anti-Mashiach. He talked about believing in a day when Torah would come and the whole world would be exposed to Torah, where there would be just a fantastic awakening to Torah for all the Jews everywhere, and that Torah, above rabbinical pilpul, which he was not a fan of in general, the correctness of Torah would be the thing that would bring everyone together, and ultimately, I see even us in Benei Avraham as a fulfillment of some of the prophecies he would, in my opinion, they were prophetic in maybe not an intentional way, but in a way that he desired. In us, we're coming from different religions, different backgrounds, and Hashem leads us this place, and we're going here, and we're like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, and then we get to a point like, whatever you say, Hashem, you are God, and your Torah is above all things, and we will understand you as you are meant to be understood. We will understand your sages and the Mashiach as you want them to be understood. And ultimately, it's to me, I foresee a time coming where it's going to be a complete fulfillment of what the Vilna Gaon said. And possibly, you go to Walmart and it's not Walmart anymore. It's like Jewmart, and an entire Jewish world. There's awakening of Jews in the ghettos in America. There's awakening of Jews in the jungles in Africa. There's awakening of Jews in Mexico, in Panama, in Guatemala, in Canada, in China, all over the world. Hashem is doing the most amazing works. And a lot of times they're being brought to a very rather strict form of Orthodox Judaism, as like Benei Avraham does. And I think that this is the fulfillment of the Vilna Gaon is intellectual honesty when it comes to the Torah. But specifically, who his Talmudim were, I don't know, honestly.
Thank you.
One of the rabbis that I follow, Rabbi David Bar Haim, he has some similarities with Vilna. I think he probably respects him a lot. He believes in wearing tefillin any time of the day. I don't think he wears it all the time, but he will wear it like just he won't only wear it during prayers. He'll wear it during study and whatever. And he also is opposed to a lot of Hasidic things and Kabbalah and stuff like that. So there's still some mitnagids, right? And he's also a genius. Actually, he's a halakhic genius. That's what my Breslov rabbi said about him, Rabbi David Barhaim. Even though they disagree when it comes to Kabbalah, they used to be friends.
Mm.
I think that's what's interesting about the Jewish world. Hashem may have some people have a desire to be more mystical, and some people more practical, and you need both. Definitely Vilna Gaon is teaching about the way to treat his family. A lot can be said there. I'm not gonna say anything against him, but I don't know if that's necessarily the way to go. But we have all different streams in Judaism that can that we can glean from.
Sounds good. Thank you, Atzalyahu, for giving us such a good, thorough report. And I think we all have a little more knowledge about the Vilna Gaon than we did before we started, that's for sure. So that was really good. Thanks.
Hello, Davar, Rabbi.
Except for you didn't hear any of it. So you need to do your own study. No. There's a recording. All right, let us stop the recording.